Hey there, glad you could join us. It's that time again at PC Games Hardware for some benchmark fun. This time there aren't any real benchmarks, but instead there's an analysis of energy efficiency. We've never had this before in this way, and I'm going to show you now how much power 28 current graphics cards consume and what the running costs are. Let's get started. The electricity prices have gone down a bit recently, at least that's what my new electricity provider says, but in the long run, the prices obviously only know one direction, and that's up, and of course parallel or analogous to that. Wherever graphics cards go, they keep getting more power hungry. And overall, this naturally leads to running costs. Depending on how long you play per day, per week, or per year, your running costs will gradually increase just to keep the computer on and continually generate those lovely detailed images you enjoy. So it's not just the purchase price of a graphics card that's important, but also how much it costs you while you're using it. You can offset that, and in the end, it might turn out that a cheaper graphics card is actually more expensive after a year than a pricier one because it uses more power. So that these aren't just a few meaningless words, I actually calculated this for all graphics cards ranging from 120 to around 1700 euros. So basically everything you can currently buy, including a few well-aged used cards. And yeah, let's see what's ahead. Let's start with the budget graphics cards, the models between roughly 120 and 210 euros. And I'll start with these, separated, because I think, yeah, these are graphics cards up to full HD. You can, of course, use them in lower resolutions as well. However, I'd say these are full HD graphics cards at best. And that's why you can also look at each one individually to see how much power they consume under full HD and how the energy efficiency is in that case. What you see here is the FPS watt rasterizing chart of budget GPUs, specifically the full HD performance index, so isolated to the full HD performance index, not the overall performance index, in relation to the average power consumption across all tests. That's around 100 data points per graphics card. And some really interesting numbers come out, as you can clearly see here. More is better, meaning more FPS per watt. And there's a top graphics card, the RTX 3050 with 6GB, which we have thoroughly tested and reviewed for its solid performance and reliable features, offering great value. This is the slimmed down 8GB version. There's even a fully passive card. Their magic doesn't just come through a modern production, on the contrary. Here, ancient Ampere silicon is still at work, but the card is massively undervolted. From Nvidia at the factory, runs at 70 watts under gaming load, which makes it very efficient. So for bargain hunters, it's the first choice. However, it's relatively expensive for what it offers. And that refers to the frame rate, not energy efficiency. Yeah, roughly 200 euros expensive. That's why it's a graphics card you should consider if you really want something economical and efficient, not fast. Second place is kind of like the best of both worlds. This graphics card, the Radeon RX 6600, ranks at around 130 watts. That's the reference board power for all full HD benchmarks, much faster than the RTX 3050 6GB, with excellent performance across tasks. You can clearly see it's almost twice as power hungry, but its efficiency remains impressively close to what you'd usually expect from such a device. You can see here, the 3050 is ahead by 12%, so the Radeon RX 6600 is not only our overall budget tip, but also for those who want to play as efficiently as possible. Everything below that, so most of the graphics cards aren't really suitable for gaming purposes, as I've mentioned in several of my videos already before this. However, regarding the ARC graphics cards or the ARC Trio, I'd like to point out once more that you can see very clearly they're not really energy efficient, but they are all on a comparable level. And yes, they are definitely a good choice for people who want a lot of FPS per euro, but they do require significantly more power than, for example, an RX 6600 or RTX 3050. Now let's move on to the full-grown graphics cards, as I like to call them, everything from around 200 euros up to 1700 euros, covering the entire gaming spectrum. What you currently find on the market, including some old cards for comparison, so here it is now. This is the total index. So all four resolutions we test in the 20 games are calculated, and that's around 250 data points per graphics card, so really a lot, and also pretty accurate, one could say. And that's where you get quite a few different things compared to budget cards, but one step at a time. In this chart, you can now see 28 graphics cards, and you might be surprised which graphics card is in first place. This isn't just about who's got the fastest GPU, but rather the most efficient one. That's the RTX 4090. As you can see, I recorded an average power consumption of 355 watts, not 450, which is a notable difference from the anticipated value. And there's a simple reason for that. This graphics card can pull 450 watts when, so to speak, the shit hits the fan, meaning when it's really under heavy load. However, across all games, all resolutions, so many different workloads, the graphics card consumes significantly less power. She occasionally puts in a few idle cycles and becomes very efficient simply because she is so powerful, and that just results in nearly first place. The little siblings for around 1000 euros, the 4080 and 4080 Super, end up with the same efficiency, just slightly below. And the other RTX 4000 cards follow quite closely behind because they are all comparably efficient. You can see that very well. And that's precisely why I'd like to climb down the ladder a bit and see where exactly the first Radeon comes. Here it is. I think it should be rank 9. Not that important though. You can see the top model from AMD of the current generation, the Radeon RX. 7900 XTX is the most efficient Radeon model for the same reason as the 1490. This card is extremely powerful, meaning it's not running at its full load but rather can chill a bit in between tasks. And this ultimately results in noticeably high efficiency overall. By the way, we have an extremely fast and responsive system with very GPU-intensive scenes. That means in practice, it's likely that on regular processors, which aren't super fast, these cards might even run a bit more efficiently. Feel free to check it out at your leisure. Link in the description. These benchmarks will stay there forever. I will also update it. This is a maintained ranking list that I will keep refining whenever new data comes in. This is the current status as of July 2024. By the way, before I switch the benchmarks, that's running in the background, but more on that when it's ready. I also want to point out a few other things here, like for example, when the first Intel graphics card is coming. You really need to scroll down quite a bit here. This information isn't new to you either, however. Here it is in its full, unfiltered, fully glory, in quotes for emphasis. Here we see, ranking 4th from the bottom, the most energy-efficient ARC graphics card. Specifically the A770 16GB with approximately 220 watts. So you can see in terms of energy efficiency, Intel doesn't win any prizes, but in terms of FPS per euro, that's also nothing new. But you can see, for example, if you take the ARC A770 as a base and compare it to the similarly fast Radeon RX 6700 XT, the AMD card is 21% more efficient. And if you take the Radeon RX 7600 XT as a more recent comparison model, this AMD model is even 31% more energy efficient. Let's move on to ray tracing. The rankings are completely different there. It's really interesting, although for simplicity I've noted the same power consumption for all graphics cards here. Some of you might raise your eyebrows now because normally rasterizing results in lower power consumption compared to ray tracing. Because with ray tracing there's more to be done, yes and no. For us, ray tracing is indeed more demanding overall, but we do use upsampling. And because it balances out a bit, just to avoid confusing you, I've really used the same power consumption values for rasterizing and ray tracing. Because if I were to throw in different numbers now, it would be nonsense. Overall, it fits this level. So in that respect, it's a valid list for a guideline. Now that that's been said, we can go ahead and take a look at the ranking. I find it really interesting because there's a pretty clear formation of groups. Upon closer inspection, I was able to see in detail that the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 models listed in the ranking are all RTX 4000 series cards. Where does it come from? Simple. RTX 4000 cards are ray tracing masters, which means they achieve very high performance with fewer FPS, but the same amount of power. And from this, it logically follows that there is a better energy efficiency ratio compared to the competition, which is slower. There we are at 11th place. And once again, it's the top model from AMD, this time even with a noticeably larger gap to the next slower card in the lineup. And we can see, yes, that's a relatively good value in the mid-range or even around the mid-range when compared to others, but you can clearly see the most inefficient GeForce, the 4060, is 28% more energy efficient in ray tracing than the 79 XTX. Ouch, that's quite a significant difference. And you can see the enormous progress NVIDIA made when jumping from the RTX 3000 series, manufactured by Samsung, to the RTX 4000, manufactured by TSMC if you compare it to the 3080 or 3090 Ti. They're positioned down here at approximately 0.15 index points per watt each. And yeah, let's make a detailed comparison between the 3090 Ti, the top model from 2022, with the current top model. Then we see the energy efficiency in ray tracing has impressively increased by 88%. Not bad. The ARC graphics cards that lag behind in rasterizing make up some ground here, simply because Intel, just like NVIDIA, values ray tracing. Inside there are processing units specifically for ray tracing, and that's why they climb up a bit in the chart. Not just with the bar charts, but also with the efficiency chart here. And you can see that the A770, yeah, I don't know, makes around 5 placements better. And at the very least, here it can quite clearly beat the AMD cards like the 7600 XT and especially the 6700 XT models in most of the benchmarks. And it lands roughly on the efficiency level of the 2080 Ti. That's also not super great because 2080 Ti is 2018 level, but at least it's something. Now you have all the reference values right in front of you, and theoretically you can calculate the running costs for your graphics card, if you want. It can unfortunately be painful if you've had such a device in the computer for years and play a lot. But let's take it step by step. I have a formula for you here, which makes it very easy to calculate the current or the ongoing costs. And in this case, I'm going to assume 30 cents per kilowatt hour for simplicity's sake. That might not be everyone's price, but it is a realistic price for the year 2024. I hope you're up to the level. If not, switch. It might be worth it. Always make sure that the base price isn't high. With this fantastic formula, you probably dislike math as much as I do, though. You can calculate the costs of your graphics card. And I have an RTX 4090 example here. Released in October 2022, it sparked significant excitement and discussions within the tech community. And if you bought one at the start, like a Founders Edition, it might have come around the 13th. October comes, then you've had about 630 days of fun with it, until today. Around 630 days. Let's assume you played with it every day for around 3 hours. I don't know if that's really realistic, playing 3 hours daily. Let's see. As an average, it's okay. You must simplify the formula. So 3 hours per day, 630 days until today at 442 watts full load. All of this is a bit theoretical, but simplified. You're already well aware of where this journey is headed. Therefore, the formula appears as follows. 442 watts times 0.3 cents times 1890 hours. This yields 630 days multiplied by 3 hours. 1890 divided by 1000. And what you end up getting are the pure electricity costs for this entire process that you, playing with this graphics card for almost 2 years, would cost over 250 euros. And logically, if you play for 6 hours every day, that would be 500 euros already. Intense. Therefore, undervolting, which we've also had a few of, is really worthwhile and I highly recommend it. A 4090 can be easily pushed below 400 and even down to 300 watts without any noticeable loss in performance. With undervolting curve tuning and such, you notice it not just in noise levels but also in running costs. But I have 2 more examples for you that I found very interesting. For instance here, whoever bought a graphics card like this, a fantastic little RX 6600, it's a year older, meaning it's been available since fall 2021. Anyone who's been playing with this has theoretically been having fun for 1000 days already. A bit more choppy, but you can definitely have fun with it. He's only paying 120 euros for electricity, so about half of what this one costs, even though the card was in use for a year less. If you've been wondering what this ancient junk is all about, well, that's because I'm old and I thought theoretically, what if I used these voodoo graphics here, which I bought in 1996 and have been using ever since. And yes, I know electricity costs have tended to rise. Very significantly even. However, now I'm going to check what the electricity cost would be if you'd been using this graphics card for 28 years and also played with it for 3 hours a day. It is definitely a very simplified calculation, but I really found it very interesting what comes out of it. And you can see it here, the voodoo graphics here, and this is the 6 megabyte version, which probably needs a bit more power. I just calculated with 15 watts, that's really the peak. I think it only needs 10 watts overall, but as I said, simplified calculation. With 15 watts and the current electricity price, which definitely wasn't 30 cents per kilowatt hour back in '96, and 30,000 hours of gameplay, the electricity costs here amount to a cozy 135 euros after 28 years. Not bad at all, I would say. I hope you enjoyed watching the video and found it helpful, as it's pretty enlightening to know how much it costs to play games all day. And I have to say, of course, that you have more components in the computer than just the graphics card alone. So unfortunately, the running costs are higher. You likely have monitors too. Just as a side note, you can go ahead and measure at the socket what your computer needs and then plug that into this formula, and you'll have a rough idea of what your hobby is costing you. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like, and tell the world about it, because the world should know.